Dr. Amit Padra, Vice Chancellor, Voxan University, Hyderabad, based in Telangana State. Welcome to ET Government.
Thank you, Mr. Radhakrishna. Thank you for having me.
Relatively new university, born during May 2020 amid pandemic crisis. What's your mandate?
We are probably one of the youngest educational institutions to have been granted university status. We was established in 2014. So in about 6 years, we got the university status. So a lot of people would wonder how such a new institution could be given university status. The reason was, I think, that we had a vision. We wanted to do certain things which are path breaking, which are truly disruptive in nature, which bring in massive amount of change. And the government felt that it would be a good idea to give us the university status, which would give us a free hand to do the things that we want to do. And our mandate is to become a world-class university, and each of the schools that we have should achieve world-class standards. We want to be state of the art in terms of pedagogy, in terms of quality of faculty, quality of students, the quality of infrastructure, the quality of technology used. Our benchmarks are basically the top universities in the world, and our mandate is to be an extraordinary university and have extraordinary school students products. That is our mandate.
Due to COVID experience, are your priorities changed?
Our priorities, our strategic priorities have not changed at all, because we see COVID as one of the many things that will come in the way. So many such challenges will come, and we are ready to face them. So we are not deterred by any of these things. So our priorities have not changed at all, but we have learned a number of things. We have learned to change, transform adversity into advantage. Whenever we come across an adversity, we try to see how that can be transformed into an advantage. And COVID posed a number of challenges, but we have derived a lot of learnings from that. And those learnings have translated into significant improvements in the way we handle things. And we have implemented many of those things, and we are in the process of implementing many more. So, yes, to answer your question, priorities have not changed. We have learned things from the adversity, and we are trying to put those learnings to good use.
COVID-19 pandemic has severely impacted various sectors. There is no exception for higher education. In your view, how technology can help building continuity in education?
Technology has obviously a very major role in every walk of life, in every sphere of human activity. So, of course, in education also it plays a very big role. So I see technology playing role in two areas, one in academic delivery and one in academic administration. So in academic administration, we are introducing large elements of technology, whether it's artificial intelligence induced student administration. We have got a learning management platform, which of course a lot of people have. So we have got an ERP, which helps us to manage the entire university systems. So technology, computer-based interventions for administration, we have used in good proportion. But more than that, we have introduced technology for program delivery. So, which includes not only a lot of innovative ways of online delivery, that is the normal synchronous model of delivery, where the instructor talks and the student listens at the same time. But we are also developing asynchronous models where we are creating curated content. We are creating recorded lectures which can be delivered to students at their own time of the choosing. We are developing methods of evaluation which are technology driven. We are developing, things like, augmented learning, which can help students learn significantly. We are developing innovative methods of creating content. Most significantly, what we have, I think, done here is that we are getting faculty from different parts of the world from the Americas, North America, South America, from Western Europe, from Eastern Europe, from North Africa, from Vietnam, Korea, from Singapore. So these people deliver using technology. And I think that has been a very great gain for us. So, yes, technology has a huge role to play and in education, and we are trying to make use of technology to the fullest possible extent.
What should be the key focus areas of your university for strengthening?
The key focus areas for the university, well, there are several. So, to attract the best possible faculty. That is the key focus area. Faculty is at the heart of the university. So, we do a lot of things to help faculty to not only encourage them, but to also support them in various activities, like not only upgrading themselves, delivering content, and doing research, and so on, creating new content. So, one priority is, of course, attracting the best pool of faculty. The second priority is transforming the student experience. You take the student and then how you really transform the student so that the student is the biggest winner in the game. For us at the university, the most important person on the campus is the student. The student is the most important person. The second most important person on the campus is the faculty. All of us are supporting these two. So the second, you can say the other priority is the student experience. So the student becomes really industry ready. And the third priority is building the fine infrastructure, which includes the technology infrastructure. It includes other physical infrastructure like recreation centers, good hostels, but technology is at the heart of it. And the fourth important priority for us is to give them an international, diversified international experience. So they become truly global citizens. So we have operating MOUs with more than 17 universities all over the world. Most of these are very well placed. So to give the students a truly international experience, I think that is our other priority. So these are my four priorities.
Can you elaborate your international collaborations?
We have international cooperation agreements in several formats. So one format has been the global immersion, where the students go and spend a week with one of the top universities in the world. So one of them is the Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. So it is FT ranked 24. So it's one of the top universities in the world. Then, or there's a Mannheim Business School in Germany. That's also FT ranked 74 in the world. So they have this global immersion. Then we have progression agreements where the student does 1 year with us and 1 year with the other university in Western Europe. So that's called a progression agreement. We have another type of agreement which is a student exchange. So a student goes to the other university for one term, one semester or trimester, studies there and comes back. Then we have faculty exchange. So our faculty goes there and their faculty can come here, or teach there and their faculty can teach here. We have joint research, we have joint curriculum development, and we have agreements of this kind across the world. So we have agreements with universities in the UK and France, in Germany and Portugal, in Georgia, in Eastern Europe, France. In North America, we have United States. Then we have in South America, we have Venezuela, Peru, Brazil. Then in Asia, we have Vietnam, Singapore, Korea, South Korea. In Africa, we have Morocco. And in the Indian subcontinent, we have collaborations with a university in Bangladesh. So, yes, so we have a number of international collaborations, agreements of cooperation, and the agreements are on the lines that I just mentioned earlier.
With the improved bilateral relationship between India and foreign countries, how do you
Yeah.
see the higher education collaborations between the two universities, between the institutions?
Everybody is watching India because the sheer high quality of the scholarship. If you look at the kind of students that are coming out of India, who are making a mark worldwide, across the world. Earlier, it used to be North America. Right now, Indian students are going to Western Europe, to Korea, Singapore, even China. The kind of mark Indian students are making, the world is watching India because it is a great, it's emerging as a great hub of talent. And Indian faculty members have made their mark. If you look at European or more than that, maybe in the US and Canadian universities, every top university has, a large number of top ranking faculty members in the US. Not just today, but over the last 30 years, the US Indians have been a dominant player in the academic scene in North America. So yes, we enjoy tremendous amount of respect when we talk to universities overseas, and I think the world is watching India.
Wonderful. I think after doctors, after engineers, now the time has come for to give a equal respect for the faculty and professors, those who are belonging to the Indian country. Am I right, Dr. Amit?
Absolutely. In fact, in the US, Indian faculty members are dominant. In my faculty members of Indian origin in the US universities, you'll find top ranking faculty members in every major university in the US and who are from India. So I think people know more of engineers than doctors. I think generally what is not known is the kind of presence of Indians in the academic domain. But I can tell you that Indians are dominant in the US. The Indian origin faculty members, I mean, one of the most prominent faces, of course, Mr. Nitin Noria, who was the dean of the Harvard Business School, but he's not an exception. He's not the only one. There are many, of course, they are not as visible and as prominent, but in Harvard also there are so many Indians who are doing so well. So Indians are a very big force worldwide in the intellectual arena. It is not only doctors and engineers, but Indians in the academics also have played a very, very significant role,
And
not only today, but over the last 30 years.
okay, so India will be a game changer in 2021, definitely.
No question about it.
Yeah. Now the question comes. Let me ask you. Most of the universities now, after facing the crisis, be it a pandemic, for example, want to become like a world-class universities, future-ready universities, and make the students as a world-class workforce. Are you in the race of
Yes,
world-class, world or future-ready university?
of course, we are. That's a priority. And the way to do it is to build outstanding infrastructure, which the learning infrastructure, I'm not talking about infrastructure in terms of good classrooms and good hostels and good, sporting centers, which we already have, which we are having and we are building. I'm talking about infrastructure in terms of learning infrastructure.
Okay.
And what the universities today need is infrastructure which is at par with the best workplaces in the world. So our endeavor is to build support systems for students which are equivalent in terms of technological level with the best workplaces in the world. So we are setting up a Bloomberg Lab. So Bloomberg, as you know, is you know very well what that is. You're from Economic Times, so it is basically a resource where you can access databases for hundreds of thousands of companies worldwide, what they have been doing over the last 50 or 60 years. So all that data is available. You can do trading in real time. So it is basically for investment bankers, for capital markets. It's a fantastic resource. So we are setting up a Bloomberg Lab. You can count on your fingertips. Maybe not more than 12, universities have a Bloomberg Lab in India. We are setting it up, and we are setting up a state-of-the-art robotics lab. We are setting up state-of-the-art, business analytics laboratory. So all these things are, we are setting up a state-of-the-art artificial intelligence lab. We are setting up an incubation center. So all these are at par with the best facilities you have worldwide, not in India, but all these are global standard, labs. So therefore, even if a person were to go to the US and start working on analytics, he would feel that, yeah, this infrastructure I have had in my college also. So when they go somewhere, what they'll find, they can start working from day one because they have already gone through. They've been trained on the similar infrastructure. So are we making things future ready? Yes, I can tell you that the kind of labs we are setting up, even many workplaces will not have labs of that standard. So yes, we are trying to make future ready students. We are trying to create future ready learning. Yes, that is a priority.
Can you achieve your goals without technology?
No way. Technology is important. Technology is part of it. Technology is everywhere. So technology is changing the game. Technology will change professions. Technology will change the way people are working. So we are in the state of the art artificial intelligence lab, or our robotics lab, or our capital markets lab, that's Bloomberg lab, or the data analytics. All these are highly technology driven. So even our coffee machines are AI powered. So technology powers everything, and we are trying to create a technology-enabled environment where everything there's a technology angle, there's a science angle in everything, every course, every subject, every program.
Education sector witnessing hybrid model of education. Are you gearing up for that? Are you ready for that? Hybrid model of teaching, online and
Yes,
offline.
yes. So I look at hybrid as in two formats. One is online and offline. So obviously, over the last 9 months, we have been doing primarily offline online training. So as and when the COVID-19 pandemic ends, are we going to go back fully to the earlier offline mode? Answer is no, because we have understood the gains of online learning. The gains come in several packets. It could be accessing faculty from all over the world. Now, earlier also we have had faculty from all over the world, but they used to travel all the way. So imagine a person traveling all the way from the US to deliver two courses. Not only is it very time consuming, but the course has to be completed in maybe 3 weeks or so because he cannot stay here for 6 months. So now with this online mode, he can come from any part of the world, doesn't have to physically fly down, and he can cover the course over 10 weeks or 15 weeks, whatever is mandated. So we are definitely going to have a mix of training, teaching, which is in the conventional mode where the instructor is in the class and the students are in the class. But we are going to mix it up with a number of things. For example, synchronous versus asynchronous. That's another type of hybrid. So a person talks and the student listens at the same time, or a person creates content and the student listens, goes through it in his own time. That's another kind of hybrid. So asynchronous versus synchronous, online versus offline, core faculty versus outside faculty, core faculty versus industry faculty, domestic faculty versus overseas faculty. These are all hybrid models. So hybrid is not just online versus offline. And we have experimented with all these hybridizations. And our experience has been very good. And there's no reason why we should not continue with those experiences. So we are looking at hybridization of different forms, and we are certainly going to maintain it, and we are certainly going to derive the maximum advantage of it. And yes, hybrid is here to stay. We have derived the benefits from it. We have learned the benefits. We have learned how to use it, and we are going to use it going forward from here. Absolutely.
I mean, you started 2014, 6 years of experience. You became university 2020. Now you are in a stabilizing the mode of your complete operations. Going forward, how do you see the roadmap? Do you expand your university operations within Telangana, or you have any plans across the country?
We don't envision Voxen going out of this campus. So we have a 200-acre campus, and we want to build it as a center of excellence at this point of time. So in terms of number of schools, yes, we had 3 schools before we became university. We have added the School of Technology this year after we became university. We have added a number of programs. For example, we have added the Global MMS program. We have added the Financial Services program. We have added the BBA program. We have added the BCom Honors program. So we have added those. We have added the PhD program. We are going forward. We are going to have more schools, possibly School of Law, possibly School of Economics. So going forward, we are going to have at least 4 to 5 other schools in the next 4 years. And we expect exponential jump in the number of students over the next 4 to 5 years. So I think we are looking at growth in terms of more programs, more schools, larger number of students. But all this growth for the timing we are looking at this location. We have a 500, 200-acre campus. So we are looking at the growth in this location at this point of time.
With the increasing foreign students to India, now the number around 46,000 to 50,000 per annum coming to Indian market,
Yes.
maybe 10 lakhs going to abroad, Indian students going to abroad, 10 lakhs.
Yes.
How do you see the Hyderabad market for higher education? Where does Hyderabad stand today compared to cities like Pune, Mumbai? I mean, can you just share your views on that?
I think Hyderabad is poised to be a hub of educational excellence. Apart from us, we have, of course, ISB, we have IIT in Hyderabad, and we have the NMIMS campus. So we have a number of higher education institutions in Hyderabad, and students in Hyderabad are somehow very much internationally oriented. So they want to explore what is happening in other parts of the world. And that ties in well with our orientation. We also have an international connect of a very significant nature. So our orientation and our priorities very much dovetail with the priorities of a lot of students. So those students who want to go overseas, if they experience the same thing in India, so that would be a great thing for them. So we have a campus which has got a world-class infrastructure. So we are getting faculty from different parts of the world. So the students may experience the world sitting right here in Hyderabad. So I think it goes very well with what the Hyderabad students and Telangana students and Andhra Pradesh students are looking for. It goes very well. And since we are poised to have global standards, we are looking at a lot of international accreditations. We are looking at international ranking. So all that, the purpose of that is to position ourselves as a world-class university. And there's no question in my mind that in the years to come, we'll attract a large number of overseas students who want to study in a world-class institute. But they may want to have something closer at home, or something which is probably we are trying to exceed what overseas universities are doing. So if all goes well, we'll probably be significantly better than many other world-class universities all over the world. So we should attract students not only because we will be economically more attractive destination, but more than that, we should attract students because we are actually a better institution, and that is our goal.
Finally, Dr. Amit, your views on National Education Policy 2020 brought out by Government of India?
The National Education Policy is a very progressive policy, and it has been fashioned by sort of finest minds, and it gives you tremendous amount of flexibility. The choice-based credit system, or the interdisciplinary style of education. It's focused on creating better individuals, not just better educated individuals, but better individuals who would lift the standard of society and the country. I think these are some of the things, and of course, there's a huge emphasis on vocational education. So it is a visionary document, and I believe that it is going to, as and when we are able to implement all of that, it's going to radically transform. It's also envisioning a different approach to regulation. Also a different approach to technology enablement, better technological infrastructure. It is a very visionary document, and I think it is the kind of blueprint that the country needs at this point of time. I am very much in support of it, and it reflects many of the views held by the more progressive academicians across universities in India. So yes, I'm excited by it, and we are trying to adopt some of the key features which are spelled out there, and they are also pretty much in line with what we have been doing anyway. Yes. So the answer is yes. It's a great thing. It's a very good policy, and we are in support of it.
Any new strategies coming up in placements, campus recruitments?
Actually, the entire placement scenario is undergoing a change. Earlier, people used to come to select good native talent. So, a person has good innate abilities, they would select. Today, companies are looking for people who can start working from day one. So they're looking for people who will become productive the day they are appointed. So companies are looking for candidates who will start delivering at a very early stage. So we are also gearing up for that. And in fact, we have not gearing up, but we have been working towards it over the last 6 years. So our students, we are trying to make them, company ready, profession ready from day one. And I think employees are becoming very picky, and they're picking up candidates who have been oriented. So we have internships, we have actually projects, company-based projects. So we try to create candidates who can be actually productive at a very early stage. That's what the recruiters are also looking for. They are not just looking for big names in terms of names of the university. They are looking for the job ready candidates, and we are actually working in that direction. Not just today, we have started working in that direction many years back. So yes, our campus recruitment patterns are changing, and I think we welcome it. We see it as an opportunity to engage the corporates and compete with our older rivals in the academic system. And I think we are prepared for it, and we are dealing with it.
Dr. Amit Badra, thank you very much for talking to ET Government.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, and it has been a pleasure, Mr. Radhakrishnan.